And now to introduce our speaker. Tocarra Williams, a proud first-generation college graduate from rural northern Missouri, is currently the Assistant Director of TRIO Student Support Services at North Central Missouri College in Trenton. With nearly 10 years of experience at NCMC, she focuses on improving graduation and transfer rates for low-income and first-generation students. Previously, she worked for Missouri Children's Division, collaborating with families and service providers to reduce the risk of child abuse and neglect. Ms. Williams obtained her first college degree from NCMC as a teen mom and almost 2 decades ago. Her personal and professional experiences drive her dedication to fostering social connections that help underserved student populations achieve academic and career success. She holds a Master of Public Affairs degree from the University of Missouri-Columbia and is currently pursuing a PhD in the Truman School of Government and Public Affairs at MU, where her research interests revolve around social capital and underserved populations. So Tocarra, thank you so much for being here today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I appreciate it. Again, thank you for having me. And it's such a wonderful opportunity for us to get together, those of us who understand not just higher education in Missouri, but also, the dynamic of rural colleges, rural institutions, because we definitely encounter some, different obstacles, and there's also different opportunities. But what I want to focus on today is social capital. I first became interested in the concept of social capital before I even really knew what it meant. Um, if I can get my PowerPoint to work. Okay, there we go. So about me, you already learned a little bit about me, and the reason why I wanted to share kind of my less than traditional first generation college route is because those are the students that I work with. I was that student. And I kind of have that the what I learned from being that student and what I continue to learn from the students that I serve in TRIO. I believe it helps me, those experiences help me continually improve how I deliver services to those students. So I started here in this building, actually the building that I'm speaking from today, Geyer Hall. I grew up um, walking past this building, seeing this building. My grandmother's home wasn't too far from there. The public library isn't too far from here. And that just seemed like a place I wanted to be. It seemed like something that I wanted to do. I loved school. I loved reading. I loved all those things as a young kid. And they were aspirations that my parents didn't have for themselves. School wasn't their favorite thing, but they were such great cheerleaders for me. But like so many first generation college students, they really didn't know the first thing about FAFSA and scholarships and community college and four-year institutions and ACT. You should really take it more than once. These things were really foreign to my family, despite how supportive they were for me to do anything that I really wanted to do. So I decided early on, despite being a pretty high achiever when it came to college, that I wanted to go to the community college right in my hometown, North Central Missouri College, where I work today. I decided that I wanted to get my start there. I was young, and I also happened to be very in love at the time with the biological father of my child. I found out that I was expecting when I was actually going to school here. Um, and that changed things for me. And it changed things for me in lots of different ways, but it definitely changed things. Um, there were cultural expectations in my rural community that I would stop going to college, that I would stop doing these things. There were expectations that, that I couldn't do both of these things. I kind of couldn't have it all. But I found out quickly that if I really, as I talked to people and as I understood more about the opportunities that I had at my disposal at North Central Missouri College and beyond, that there was a framework that could help support people like me. So I'm a proud recipient of Pell Grants and assistance to go to college. And it is these sort of connections, these social connections that I didn't know mattered as much as I know they mattered now, that really got me there. So from there, I went on to get my Bachelor's of Science. And I graduated the same year and month that um, I would have graduated had I had not had little Finley in tow. And so I'm very proud of that. But I was able to do that because of this invisible network that was around me at the time that supported me. So, why first generation students? For one, a lot of us work with first generation college students. There are many first generation college students at my institution. They are ever present at community colleges because it really is a wonderful place to start your education, especially if you need that extra support. If you're nervous about going to that big college with the lecture hall, this is a wonderful start, and A plus is a wonderful program that I was able to benefit from as well. So a few stats about first generation college students. I'm sure we've all seen a lot of these, but over 1/3 of undergraduates in bachelor's degree programs are first generation students. So these are definitely populations that we need to be looking at when we are serving those students. And the reason why first generation college students are so important to me, not just because that's my roots, but I also work for TRIO. So my TRIO grant is Student Support Services, and as many of you may know, the whole objective is to help get first generation college students, those with lower incomes and those with disabilities, more present at four-year institutions. We help them graduate here at NCMC, but we also want to see them more present at four-year institutions because that's where we're still seeing a lack of first generation college student representation. And we want to see them there and we want to see them succeeding. So many of these students come from lower income households. Many of the times, if somebody has the first generation designation, they also have a lower income designation as well. And they're also more likely to incur more college debt. 82% of students with two parents who earn bachelor's degrees or higher also graduated with their bachelor's. And first generation college students make roughly $36,000 less than their counterparts. And those are some gaps that we try to bridge when we serve students here at North Central Missouri College and Student Support Services. Only 26 of those students went on to get their degrees. So persistence also becomes an issue, and so we want to do things that will help them persist in their goals. This statement, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I know you've heard it. I don't know how you feel about it. And you're welcome to put that in the comments how you do feel about it. I have some mixed feelings about it. I know especially when I was younger, I hated hearing this. It felt like it felt like it didn't matter how hard I worked. Somebody, somehow, a system, an institution was excluding me from a place for me to reach my dreams, to reach my goals. Because I felt when I was young, when I was in high school, that I didn't know as many people as some of my counterparts. My parents, they worked a lot. They were very blue collar, wonderful parents. I had a wonderful upbringing, but sometimes it felt like we weren't part of the right social group. We didn't belong to a country club. You know, my dad worked all day and then went on to another job after work. This was my reality, but it was a wonderful childhood. However, there are some things that I would go, how do you know about that? How did you get involved in that? Because I didn't know it unless my school counselor told me. Um, so I was also lived out in the country, not just rural Missouri. I also lived out of town. So by living out of town, we didn't even get the newspaper for our town until a day or two later. So sometimes new news for even people that just lived in town was old news by the time I got it, and maybe I missed an opportunity. So these opportunities for somebody who um, was college bound could be limited. And I didn't really like this statement, but now I kind of like it But I also think there's some modifications to be had, and we'll wrap up this with that modification. But I do think this matters. But I also think what you know matters a whole lot. So we'll talk about social capital during this presentation and weak ties. We'll talk about obstacles that we encounter that I know you are encountering too. We'll talk about how self-efficacy and confidence are really bolstered by weak ties, and then some promising practices that I see, because I think weak ties are very important, even though I didn't think that they were as important when I was younger. I see them now, and I see institutions and I see organizations cultivating weak ties in ways that I think could even be improved more for our first generation college students who may have troubles reaching them. So, Mark Granovetter's work, a lot of you have probably heard of him. The Strength of Weak Ties is really the inspiration behind this presentation to you today, is I really think a lot of his work. Um, his work, The Strength of Weak Ties, actually celebrated an anniversary, a 50th anniversary recently, and he had an interview and he said, your weak ties connect you to networks outside of your own circle. They give you information and ideas you would not have otherwise gotten. So this was an interview with David Grusky. And what's interesting is this work alone has been cited over 70,000 times. That's pretty prolific, amazing work. So when we talk about social capital actually, that coin, who all coined that term? I think a lot of people were kind of coining terms and terms like that kind of at the same time when we look at research, but we really owe a lot of how we look at it today to Bordeaux and Coleman. So I'll just share the definition is still a little unclear on how we all agree what that definition is, but it really is those invisible ties that can really propel us into opportunities, but can also change those opportunities for us too. I feel like you can really feel them. You can't, sometimes you don't notice that they're there until you notice they're not there. You notice when you don't have those ties. So really, it's just a network of relationships that a person cultivates over the course of their life. So we look at bonding, bridging, and linking. So strong ties live here in bonding. I want you to think of bonding and strong ties, this as like if your life was a movie. These are like the main players. These are your people that keep showing up. These are the people that get billed first on the credits. These are your parents. These are your partners. These are your best friends, the friends that you've had growing up that you continue to have. These might even be coworkers that you've spent a lot of time with. Oftentimes, they become very strong ties. These are those people that you can count on for a lot of different things in your life, and they're consistently there. Um, Now, weak ties live here. So weak ties live in bridging and linking social capital. So bridging and linking, the big difference between those is that linking really taps into the idea that we connect to diverse groups that have different levels of power. Okay, so they have different levels of access to things in our society that we may want to have access to as well. So weak ties live in bridging and linking, and strong ties live in bonding. Okay, so to picture this, this is you. Okay, this is you, and this is your network of strong ties. Those are those people that are your immediate family, best friends that we discussed. And then you are also connected to a larger group. So other people also have their own strong ties and their weak tie networks. And when we start making connections with people in their individual networks, we start having some sort of access to everybody else in that way. And let me give you an example. I am a frequent weak tie, and so are you, to students, especially those of you that work with students one-on-one during the day. So you're working one-on-one. I advise many students. I am a frequent weak tie. For instance, I know I know people who work in the criminal justice field in my community. Students who are majoring in criminal justice here at my institution might go, my teacher says I need to find somewhere to do this practicum or this internship. And I say, I know what you want to do because we've gotten to know each other very, very well. Have you considered this place? Oh, and I have that contact for you. So I have become a weak tie then for that person. I would argue that sometimes we become very strong ties, especially if they know us for a very long time. Sometimes that changes a little bit, but then you see how they gain some sort of access by coming to me and sharing information about themselves and their dreams and their goals with me as their SSS advisor. Then I was able to connect them to then my network. And that is power when it comes to driving your academic goals and your career goals. So why weak ties? Weak ties and strong ties are both important. I'm not here to dismiss strong ties. Strong ties are what my less than traditional student route got me through college, but it was also weak ties that really got me through. I recall when I was in high school and in college, I worked at a grocery store called Piggly Wiggly. And I worked the desk where you could rent movies and you could buy lottery tickets. And I worked back there. And I talked to a lot of people. And I really enjoyed that. That was a great after school job for me. And I really enjoyed it. And I made a lot of weak tie connections that I didn't even know I was making. And when I look back, I remember when our grocery store closed, when Piggly Wiggly closed, I had to find a new job. And I had heard from my school counselor before that there was this really great place where you could go and you could type up a resume. And I needed to type up a new resume and get a new job because I was going to college and I was also expecting. So I needed to get a new job. And so I went there to print out a resume and start handing out resumes. And then when I got there, she goes, "Hey, you're the girl that was at Piggly Wiggly. I remember renting videos from you." And I said, "Oh, I remember you too." And she said, "You lost your job, and I'm sorry to hear that, but do you know about these programs?" So then I was connected at 18 years old to Workforce Investment Act funds and help and a wonderful guide that also became a formative weak tie for me. So you see how these strings connect us to one another, and at any time that string can help suspend us and keep us from falling down as we are progressing through our goals. So weak ties are kind of different, right? You get more diverse info with weak ties. Our strong ties tend to be a little bit more homogenous, right? We share a lot of more cultural and socioeconomic status. They tend to be a little bit similar. We get more diverse info. We're able to have access to more individuals with different types of information. Mobilization of resources is much more common and much more easier to kind of reach when it comes to weak ties, and they tend to offer, and I keep on saying strings, but like they tend to, weak ties tend to offer help with fewer strings attached. You've probably heard people say, don't sell a used car to a family member, right? If any of you have, maybe it was a great experience, but I've always heard that. My dad always told me that. So there kind of comes less strings attached, right? It's kind of like, oh, I provided this information to you in this, oh, I heard about this job in this opportunity. There tends to be less strings attached with weak ties and less emotional burden. That goes back to that not selling a car to your relative. It typically involves less emotional baggage and more efficient exchanges without the complexity of those really strong ties. And there tends to be a bit of like social distance and neutrality. Um, it's kind of like when giving a presentation like today. I would much rather give a presentation to a bunch of similar minded, awesome professionals that I maybe don't know very well and are not part of my strong ties than just a virtual room full of my strong ties. And anybody who does speaking probably public speaking probably kind of feels the same way. Um, so that's why we look at weak ties. Now, there is a ton of correlations out there. There's a ton of research out there about correlations between weak ties and the ability to really connect as far as job mobility, as far as those opportunities and things like that, even associated with things like negotiating raises and negotiating better benefits at your jobs. So a quick Google Scholar search will find you lots of correlations that predict those relationships really well. But what I find really interesting is that there's this experimental evidence we have now. So they actually use LinkedIn. So they use LinkedIn to collect this large scale experimental evidence over 5 years. So they use that people you may know algorithm, and they actually use that to funnel specifically strong ties and weak ties at different rates to different people. So there was that element of experimental control. And they found that weak ties on social networks are even more useful and increase job mobility the most and gave them more opportunities. So that is just more support. And I also think this is very interesting. Although we mostly work with younger people, we're finding that weak ties also help strengthen the number of strong ties over time for adults who are 40 than older. So that means that cultivating weak ties now for these younger individuals, there is reason to expect that this is going to help them live a more fulfilled life later, and it's associated with positive affect and less depression in older adults. Okay, obstacles we face. I have lots of pictures in here I've replaced of people that I know, and this is my coworker John and a wonderful student studying in our lab, our SSS learning lab. So, overcoming obstacles for first generation college students. We struggle with belonging. Do we even belong here? Do we have the role models that have the information we need to be able to apply to college, understand scholarships, understand advising, and just understanding the general landscape of higher education? There are cultural and social differences, especially if you're going to a larger institution who has, what is rushing? What is sorority and fraternity life? Can I be a part of it? What does this mean? There's these experiences that legacies and this knowledge that legacies have that first generation college students just don't. Fear. I remember feeling that, lots of fear, because my parents were loud and proud about me going to college, and I did not want to fail them. And then after I became a teen mom, I definitely didn't want to fail my child. There's stigma, there's emotional health that all students go through. These are huge life changes at a very formative time in your life. You're having to make big decisions that feel so incredibly life changing. It's bound to be overwhelming. The academics. Oftentimes, first generation college students are not as prepared. We encounter students at our institutions that maybe was able to take those upper level coursework in high school, but maybe they couldn't afford to pay for the dual credit. So there's a lot of things that kind of separate those first gen low income students from other students that feels like you're kind of behind the race before you even started. Money, always afraid of money, always afraid of taking out a loan, not understanding the differences between subsidized and unsubsidized loans, things like that, which I believe all students struggle with, and it is up to us to help them understand those things in college access. Enroll conflict. Especially with non-traditional students. We have students who are going to school full time or more, and they're also juggling family, work. They may be helping provide care for an older adult in their life. We're seeing a lot of role conflict, and we're seeing the expectations seem to be even higher on our students. Now, campus resources, that's where we can do something, right? We can do something to help them know that we're here. For one, they need to know we're here, those resources, and we need to make sure that those resources are something that they can participate in. Because the whole point here is by enhancing their confidence, overall confidence and self-efficacy, we can help them have the confidence they need to not only pass that next test, complete those 3 credits, but also complete the next 3 credits in the next semester and continue on. So a little about self-efficacy. When we're looking at self-efficacy, we're looking at that person's own belief in their capabilities to succeed so that they can execute specific tasks. Confidence is great. I do see students with overall confidence, but if it's not paired with self-efficacy, that they can see how those individual tasks can help them get to that larger goal, then I find that we're not able to get them there. So help them connect the dots. So one way that social capital, a couple of these ways to enhance self-efficacy through social modeling and social persuasion can be obtained through building social capital. Literally just introducing students, first-gen students to first-gen graduates who are professionals, who are successful, who are in their chosen field and doing well and are willing to talk to students and take interest in what their goals are and share similar experiences, just having those conversations and having that knowledge about other people, and forming those weak ties helps so much. Um, those were things that I needed because I didn't see people like me in the late 90s doing the things that I wanted to do that came from places that I came from. And when I started seeing people who did, because they shared their path, I started to see myself there. And seeing yourself there is a huge part of being successful. So, some promising practices when it comes to cultivating social capital. You pair the first generation college student with a weak tie, and that gives us access to that information, resources, and power that they didn't have, and confidence and self-efficacy they didn't have before. Here's a whole big list, and I'm going to touch base on a few of them, from things that could be way more casual and easier to implement to things that take a lot of capital of other kind. So, mentorship programs. Here is a student and a tutor in our lab studying a couple semesters ago. Mentorship programs can really span, they can be in person, they can be online. I definitely do not claim to be the expert on mentorship programs, but we have started a program within our TRIO program. And the focus really is first contact being online or through our Microsoft Teams, because that's really how we exist in the virtual space. We're seeing a lot more virtual students coming to our institution and more distance learners. We recently at North Central Missouri College also added a campus in Savannah, which has been a wonderful opportunity. And I serve students there, and some of those contacts are also virtual. And so we can create that virtual presence. So I'm also linking them up with a mentor who at least has a semester of not just college under their belt, but SSS under their belt, so they know what we can offer. So they're getting that information. They can be peer professional. Also, the essence of TRIO programs, if your institution doesn't have a TRIO program, I strongly recommend seeing when those grant competitions are and competing for those. Because what we do is a lot of support for students and also different departments on campus, and we are professional mentors. Guest speaker series. This is a speaker that we brought to campus last semester through our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. So I know a lot of us, especially at smaller and rural institutions, are doing a lot of different roles and kind of needing to be a jack of all trades. right? And so by collaborating with other departments, sometimes we're able to make something really cool happen on our campus. And Ricky Kidd came to speak last year about wrongful convictions. He was wrongfully convicted and he talked about his journey. He's a wonderful speaker and he also is very involved with the Midwest Innocence Project, who was instrumental in freeing him. And there are a lot of students that are now very interested in knowing more about the nonprofit landscape and what opportunities might exist for them in justice, in the area of justice. So we have a weak tie. I don't know if Ricky knows he's a weak tie, but he's a weak tie to many students now at NCMC because they know how to reach him because he told them how, and they know about the Midwest Innocence Project now. So it was more than just a great presentation for those people who are going into justice studies. It was a great learning experience about nonprofits as well. Our small alumni and development office does a wonderful job with recognizing our scholarship recipients, and you'll see there are students seated at tables among their scholarship donors and representatives from different places. There are options, there are occasions for them to talk during that time. And what I found is that our alumni and our community members want to make connections to our students. They just need to be provided an opportunity to do so. They want to know how they're doing. They want to be a weak tie, whether or not they know what a weak tie specifically is and how formative they can be in the student's life. But they do want to know how students at their alma mater are doing. And this is a great opportunity. Student organizations. We have a first gen club here at North Central Missouri College, and here is a group of students donating their time with Church Women United Thrift Shop, who in turn, this group actually provides scholarships to our students. And they got to meet this day a couple of retired school teachers and our current mayor of our town. What a cool opportunity for them to help their community and also meet some people who are now very interested and still ask about these students when they see me and want my students to come back and volunteer with them. These connections are important. Now, most students find workshops and events helpful, but like getting them there is sometimes difficult. And it's been more difficult. I don't know if you guys are feeling this too, but it's been more difficult over the last 10 years. I feel like 10 years ago, I could do students plus food, it would equal attendance. Then I was like, food isn't bringing them in. I'm going to get some donations for some prizes, right? I'm going to get some prizes. I'm going to get some door prizes. If I have a speaker come in, I'm going to say, hey, if you have some swag to share, we want it. Um, and that was working for a little while. But like I said, I've been here for 10 years. And now I'm seeing extra credit will get them there, but it takes collaborating with faculty, which sometimes we do. But what I'm seeing more is that we add students, the food or incentive or whatever, and we start being at their turf, then we get attendance. So make it a place that they feel comfortable engaging with new people, right? So if I scheduled a workshop and called it a workshop and I had it in a classroom and I booked a classroom that they've never been to or a building they've never been to, students aren't feeling like coming, especially if they aren't for sure, like, do I want to sit there and listen about financial literacy for an hour or 30 minutes, even though this information is important, they have a finite amount of time and there's that role conflict we talked about earlier. So be on their turf. So this is just a repeat of those promising practices for cultivating weak ties. And here's some things that we've done. And like I said, I'm not an expert in it, and it is still a work in progress on how we cultivate weak ties in ways that we can reach our modern students. But we've been doing lunch and learns. Okay, so over 30 to 60 minutes over lunch, we will invite a local industry expert to talk about something. So instead of having a rigid presentation in a foreign room or building, we are bringing a local banker to sit down with our students that can drop in as they need and ask questions. We incentivize it. We include pizza because pizza still helps. We are hungry college students, but It's a little bit less of that rigid presentation and more casual. And I find that week tie building happens really well here because there's more of those informal conversations. We're also doing what we call career and coffee chats. It's kind of the same thing, except we do it in the morning and we invite people to talk about their career and their career experience. This is actually a local judge, Judge Crone. We had the opportunity to have him come in and speak very casually to our students. And he is very interested in what these students plan to do with their education here at NCMC. And week ties were definitely connected that day. So here are just some ways that I've seen my institution cultivating weak ties in the past month. I've seen instructors assigning interviewing professionals in prospective fields for an assignment. I've seen student spotlights on our social media that highlight what that student is doing. And I see alumni engaging on social media. I'm seeing volunteering with area nonprofits. There was a trick or treat community event that a student got to really engage a lot with area businesses. I'm seeing LinkedIn used as an assignment in linking us with students. I saw myself share a job seeking ad on LinkedIn that a student posted who would have only been on LinkedIn had an instructor not assigned it, right? And then through one of her weak ties, she was able to find a job. There's student-led broadcasting where they do interviews with one another or alumni or community experts. Lots of different things that my institution is doing that is building weak ties that I really believe we just need to do more of. So it's not what you know, it's who knows what you know. So that is my rephrasing so that I get to like this quote a lot better than the first one I showed you. It's about knowing the things, but it's also about being able to show it to people and that other people know it. And those weak ties is what does that. So when I started off, I'm a very proud first generation college graduate and I support my first gen students and I love what to see what they're capable of. These past 10 years have been so rewarding for me. But my biggest dream for myself was that my child could check parent has bachelor's degree or higher when she filled out forms and access the knowledge I have that comes with it. And we came full circle last year when my Finley walked the same stage that I did many a moon ago. And I was blessed to be able to give Finley her diploma. And so there we are celebrating outside of Geyer Hall, where she first attended in utero. So it was a full circle moment that I'm very proud of. And I think cultivating these weak ties only provide opportunity for these students. And got some sources, and I appreciate you all for attending, even through the difficulties.
Thank you so much. And now we appreciate you keeping us on track and on time. We do have a few minutes for questions. If anyone
Okay.
has questions, you can place them in the chat. Thanks for that. And we can continue the conversation. And maybe while I wait for others to put their question in the chat, I wanted to just ask about something that you had mentioned earlier, which was you said you didn't see in the last 10 years, you have seen that students are less likely to attend events and workshops
Yes.
that could be beneficial to them. And do you have any um, insight about why that happens? Are people living their lives online, or is there some sort of reason that it's more difficult?
And it's just anecdotal what I have from my experience here. But what I'm seeing is that students have more role conflict than I think they've ever had before. And I think the expectations we feel on ourselves is very much mirrored in our students. So I think I know that sometimes it's easy to feel the pressure to do things faster and quicker and more efficient and than you ever have before. And I know that I feel that a lot, and I think that they're feeling it too. And so I think they're trying to do a lot more with less time. and they're working more than I notice other students work. They're bringing in more hours with their part-time jobs. They're working work study positions with us, but yet they are also working another 15 hours somewhere else. These are our traditional students that they're worried about saving money. They have a plus and maybe they live close to home going to us, but they're really worried about going into debt when they leave. So they're worried about a lot of different things. Um, and of course, our non-traditional students, um, they're always trying to do more with less. It's like such a sacrifice sometimes to go to school, and sometimes, and the way I felt as a student, um, is it almost feels like too much of a luxury to go to school when they have these other pressures. So I think that's a big part of it.
I had one more question, so I don't mean to hog uh, the the chat or anything. I'm not seeing anything in chat. Please put your questions in chat. And it just has to do with rural versus urban and whether there is a difference in the weak ties that you see between, like, is a student from a rural community more likely to have weak ties available to them because of maybe a, I mean, I don't know. I just
Yeah,
didn't know if there was a difference.
and again, like I don't there are a lot of the studies that the correlations that we see, they'll look at certain programs and they'll measure weak ties differently, or like social capital a little differently, so sometimes it makes it difficult to kind of compare. But from what I've read, a lot there's some barriers that are similar across, like if you look at first generation college students, some of those barriers are very similar. But what we get in rural places is we get sometimes we get that isolation, like we see, if you saw that map that was shown where all the colleges were, and you saw that one North Central Missouri dot, that's me. And then you saw that vacant space where there was like population decline. That's our service area, that huge service area that also spans down to St. Joseph. And so that is our area. So you also deal with a lot of distance, right? Um, and so being able to connect people with those individuals that are most like them can be really difficult. We also talk about how people are commuting to work. We're trying to figure out whether or not, some jobs can be remote work. And so when you have your weak ties, potential weak ties as professionals that we need to connect to students traveling back and forth, and then we have the students traveling back and forth to college and then working 30 hours. I think those, and that's just anecdotal, that's just from me interacting with students. I think that's where it gets really complicated.
Yeah.
But virtual connections really do help. And I've been really trying to encourage my students to not be afraid to ask someone to Zoom with them,
Oh, yeah.
and that I would facilitate that. So I facilitated those connections. I said, hey, I got this great student that's interested in the stuff you do. Let's connect via Zoom. Can I just send you a link and we can try that? And so we can connect people that way just so the conversation can be had.
That's awesome. Thank you. And we do have a question. Any suggestion on connecting with first gen when you're not a first gen yourself? My dad has 2 degrees, but my mom never went past high school.
Yeah. I know that my director was not first gen. Um but I think it's important to like it's kind of difficult because on the one hand you don't want to like connect with somebody and say, oh, I'm like first gen because of this, so I think what you really need to do is say, I know that that's really confusing. And I hear her say things, I know that's really confusing because if my mom hadn't told me that, I would not have known. So let me help you, let me be your go-to person. And so she'll talk to them like that. There's also times that um, I've had to kind of go, there's been other things that maybe they've dealt with that I didn't have to deal with. There's first generation college students that were really, like, they don't have anybody cheering them on. Remember, I said I have people cheering me on. They don't really know exactly what they're cheering, but they're like there for me. They're pumped. They'll give me their tax information for the FAFSA, but other students don't. And so I think sometimes the best we can do is connect with them through a lot of empathy and help them, connect them with weak ties that are more like them, maybe a faculty member that can be a mentor or an advocate. There are people who can, even like in financial aid, there's a wonderful person in financial aid that has been able to like draw some similarities and find some common ground with students on certain issues where I wasn't able to. And so I think pulling in your broader community and departments is really important. One time we did a whole presentation celebrating First Gen Day, which is actually tomorrow, so be sure to celebrate. Um, uh, we put pictures of all the faculty and staff up on the wall in a very prominent place in Geyer Hall, and those were everybody who was first gen. So they got to see that even our college president, Dr. Claver, was first gen, and he's really eager to talk about that experience. So connecting them with more people is a must.